Welcome to the Bloody Aussie Battler podcast with your host, Mike Holt.
It's not an illness, obviously. It's a psychological operation. It's psyops. It's psychological warfare against us. And, I think it's pretty clear it has to do with the agenda of big pharma. Yeah, I learned the other day, I didn't know this, or did you know, that Google is owned by GlaxoSmithKline, GSK. It's one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. We're dealing with a new kind of society here, corporatocracy. It's not about government. It's not about accountability or the rule of law. It's about eventually one single world corporation that everybody's going to work for. And part of that is of course, microchipping and getting everybody on board, controlled. And it flows. If you know anything about history and genocide in our own country, this is the next logical step. And like I said, if under the Indian Act in Canada, since 1874, if you're an Indian on a reservation, you cannot refuse medical treatment or a shot in the arm or you go to jail. But don't forget, you don't need a majority to change society. You need an active minority that hits at the centers of power, levers of power. And, it's organizing that conscious minority and getting them to act. That's what changes things. And then everybody else follows you in their wake. In terms of the guns, that's normally not how they rule people, not with guns, because once you have to rely on guns and violence, you've lost. That's kind of a basic principle in Sun Tzu, that a symptom that your enemy is on the defensive is when they use desperate measures. And that's certainly what they're doing right now. If enough people didn't go along with this stuff, it wouldn't matter how many guns they have. The whole system would stop. We could do that tomorrow if we were organized enough. And in terms of guns, we have police coming to our common law workshops. The idea is not we're not fighting them, we're getting them on board with us.
Well, good day again, and it's the Battler back with Kevin Annett. G'day, Kevin. How are you?
Hey, Mike. I'm doing good, and congratulations on all your successes.
Well, we're getting there, mate, and it's a team effort. We've got lots of people all over Australia now coming on board. The good news is that since my first seminar up here on the Sunshine Coast to show people what common law is and how to convene a court, I've got 3 more seminars booked. And I'm traveling all over the place. So if anybody watching this wants to have a seminar in their community, I'll be very happy to travel anywhere up as far as Rockhampton, down south to the New South Wales border, which we can't cross at the moment, and out as far west as Roma. I can't travel any further than that because I have a bit of a bad back and I can't drive too long, but anywhere there's no problem. Perhaps later on, if somebody around the country wants me to travel somewhere, if you want to pay my airfares and accommodation, I'll be happy to go. There's no fee for me to go and do it. All right, Kevin, that was the advertising over. So, mate, tell us a little bit, first of all, about what you've been up to. I see you've been very busy too.
It's mostly working on the ground, Mike, setting up these common law assemblies. And that really is a full-time job for me right now. And of course, connected to that is setting up the courts out of those assemblies and the sheriff departments. Now, we've had a lot of fear and panic going on because of the upcoming plans to, when schools open, to basically kidnap and jail children. If any of them show signs of the flu, the teachers have the right to quarantine the children, isolate them from their parents, and the parents can't see them until they agree to various new measures, including vaccinations. So people are panicking and wanting to keep the kids out of school, which they should. But there's a lot of pressure on us to come up with some legal response. So one of the things we're doing is we're actually getting the common law court to issue a court order that declares these measures unlawful and medically unsound, and criminal actions, and anyone who tries to impose those are in violation of a court order. In other words, we're turning the tables on them and saying you're the guys are the ones in violation of common law, and there can be fines and arrests if you go ahead with these measures. So we're coming up with that, and that order can be used in any country. You can just write it, and apply it. But I do think we need that actual legal order saying, you know, the authorities are the ones committing the crime. We stand in judgment of them. We order them to stop immediately, right?
Yeah. Actually, at the first seminar I did, we got everybody to sign one of those assembly documents. So we have a group of people here on the Sunshine Coast now who can assemble and convene a common law court anytime. All I'm waiting for now is for them to send us in the statement of claim, and we are in business. And I'll be doing that at each seminar. You brought up an interesting question there about sheriffs, because as you probably know now, I've been writing an ebook to help people do a course on common law. And one of the sections is all about sheriffs. And I've been reading your booklet, which is very, very helpful. And there were a few questions. Now, one question was from somebody, how long can we appoint a sheriff? Because we appoint them at the common law courts, but can they go on after the court has finished their work?
Definitely, and they should. You see, there's officers within the court, like a bailiff. They only have authority within the court system as long as the court's convening. But the sheriff has a broader function, not confined to the common law court. The sheriff is really an officer of the whole assembly, of the whole society, if you like. And they can do things outside the court, like they can make citizen arrests, they can train in their deputies to do the same measures. They defend the public peace and, you know, the citizenry and their children in that. So definitely you need to find people not only very committed, but willing to serve longer periods. I think it's a good policy to, you know, elect or have somebody volunteer for several years at least in this job. And otherwise, it's not something you can just dabble in. You've got to have a serious commitment to it, right?
Right. Well, that brings up an interesting question, because if we're going to appoint sheriffs, how do we pay them?
Well, eventually they'll be paid when we get our hands on the till, right? When we get our hands on the money of the system. For now, it's like all of our work. It's not remunerated. It's something we all put it. Now, that raises the bigger question of how we sustain ourselves, you know, financially. And we are in the assemblies, one of the first things we set up is a dues system where people do have to pay into it in order to be self-sustaining. Now, getting lump sum donations is really important. Find benefactors who are able to give us enough money to sustain ourselves for a while. That's also really important. But people have to have a stake in something. And often the way you do that is by paying dues and saying, yeah, now we have kind of joint ownership of this, right?
Yes, actually, that's something that we're addressing here in Australia now on the national team. And one of the things that I'm doing to help the common law courts system is to create this ebook. I've done 19 out of the 20 chapters, so we're almost done. And then this week we had a national team meeting, and some people now are going to do the recording of each chapter as a video, and that will then go with the book onto the website, and it'll be available for sale. We haven't set a price yet, but I'm going to suggest to the team that we charge, say, $49 or something, so that when they finish the course, they'll be very conversant with everything to do with common law, and they get a certificate at the end to show that they've actually completed the course. Mm-hmm. The way I'm going to structure it is, I hope that the software will allow me, is at the end of each chapter, you answer 20 questions. And if you can't answer them correctly, you have to go back and do it again until you do answer them all correctly. So you move step by step through the course.
That's a good idea. Yeah, very good idea.
Now, I'll be making this available to you, Kevin, because I know that, you know, anybody around the world who wants to know about common law, this course will do it. It's not only for Australia. It's designed for everybody to know about common law. I'm also going to be donating it to New Zealand. And once we make contact with the UK, which I hope will be very soon, we'll donate it to them too, and any other groups around the world who want it. So we'll donate it to them so you can all start raising funds for your work.
That's really good, Mike. As a matter of fact, today I had Zoom calls with groups like yours in Denmark and Sweden, and they all got cut. They call it the Blue Book. my common law training manual.
Yeah.
They've translated it into Swedish, Danish, and Russian. There's
Wow.
also interest in Russia. And to them, the idea of common law is a new one, but it makes a lot of sense to them. So they're trying to establish assemblies and courts based on the book. And so it's really neat to see the way this thing is taking off all over the world, right?
Yes, it is. It's taking off everywhere. We set up this common law court at the seminar the other day, but we didn't have a case to try. So the thing is, once we've got a case, the people come to us with their statement of claim, and then they prepare all their documentation. What's the next step?
You mean in terms of the court procedure itself, or
the court procedure? Because we've established the court,
yeah,
but we weren't quite sure where to go from there. So we call the claimant or the
You need a specific case, first of all, and so the person who brings the claim, we find, is the most knowledgeable about the issue, and so can serve as a prosecutor. They prosecute their own case, right? They act as the chief citizen prosecutor. And at that point, the court, it's good to have some kind of administrative setup in the court. So you can either have a court registrar. If you like, you can have, we don't like to call them judges, but say a judicial officer who can order the issuing of the summonses, for example, to the people who've been named.
Yeah, we call them an adjudicator.
Okay, adjudicator, that's good.
Yeah.
And then at that point, the normal procedure, like in due process, is if they respond, they have to be involved in the jury selection procedure, right? So jury selection is really important because it shows you that it's not a kangaroo court or a lynch mob. There's due process. The person assumed to be innocent, and they have the right to help choose the jury and all that stuff. That's kind of laid out in the common law training manual to some degree, but the stumbling block is two issues we find. It's preparing a really effective case and also enforcing the verdict once it happens. Those are the two things that require, they're new ideas for people, and so you've got to try them out. And everything else is kind of straightforward in terms of the operating of the case.
The enforcement often comes up when I'm talking to people about that, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But what we did at the first seminar was we asked people to volunteer to stand for election to the 12-man jury and for all positions. And because it was so new, I actually had to point to people and say, well, would you like to be the adjudicator? Because I knew that this particular person, for instance, had a lot of knowledge about common law and had been doing it for a long time. So is that the way you would do it, or is there a different procedure?
Well, frankly, the person who does the adjudicator has to have some legal knowledge. And again, you've laid out a good way to do that. We need to educate and train people in this. And there can be a whole, just like we did a handbook for sheriffs, we can do a whole handbook about what a judicial officer does, what an adjudicator does, right? They're expected traditionally, to instruct the jury on points of law. So that requires some knowledge of the law, and it isn't just good intention. There has to be certain knowledge of things, right?
Yeah, now this also is interesting. When you talk about law, I mean, common law is very simple: do no harm and take responsibility, and that's it. There's no other law. You don't have to know a lot of legal things to understand that. Everybody has that innate inside them. So when you talk about knowing the law, are we talking here about precedents, decisions that have been made in the past?
That's part of it. There's also just legal terms that are used. The whole idea of what due process is, a lot of this is procedural stuff, because that's what an adjudicator does. Like if the process is stymied in some way because people are unsure about a point. What is rules of evidence? For example, is hearsay admissible? Well, no. It can contribute, but it's not definitive evidence, because you can't just say, well, I heard something about this. No, you have to have witnessed it.
Mm.
or you have to have a document that can be attested to by somebody who's willing to come into court and talk about it. So those little fine points of rules of evidence and due process, they're easy enough to teach, right? But people need to know about it if you be in that position, right?
Right. Okay. Well, for us down here in Australia, it's a learning process, but it's one that we're jumping into with feet and hands, because we're very keen, especially now we've got the situation down in Victoria where the Premier, Daniel Andrews, is basically, he's become the dictator of Victoria. He's thrown out all the due process. He's thrown out the courts. He's thrown out the rights and freedoms of people. The police are actually attacking people in the streets. There was a horrifying video the other day of a policeman attacking a woman because she wasn't wearing a mask, even though she had a medical dispensation. He attacked her, threw her down to the ground, and sat on her and tried to throttle her. I mean, this is just tyranny gone crazy. So there's a lot of people, especially in Victoria right now, who are very concerned and who want to get these common law courts. So a question came up is, because everybody's locked down in Melbourne and you can't travel more than 5 kilometres from your home in most other parts of the state, how do we convene a common law court down there?
Well, it's like anything. At some point, people have to just defy what's set up. And so the idea of the court order is you have it on you at all times, and you hand it to everybody and say, we have the legal right to be here. We're not endangering anyone. Just do it. Right. And now they say, well, whoever rents you a hall, they might be fined. Go ahead, issue the fine. We'll nullify the fine in our own court and issue counter orders. Think offensively, not how can we evade something, but how are we going to take it on? Right. And it just takes determination and will, really. I mean, that's what courage is, really, when you think about it. Just stubbornness. We're not going to back down on this. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And there are people starting to step up and just, challenge the police. The problem is that the police just don't give a damn. They've thrown the law books out of the window. Now they've just become Nazi goons, basically.
Right.
All of them.
Yeah.
But a large majority, and you should see the uniforms they dress in these days. It looks very similar to the Nazi uniform,
Yeah.
It's scary stuff. Yeah. And I'm up in Queensland, and we're worried that it's going to start happening here too, because we've got a very communist-inspired premier here too, Palaszczuk, and we call it Palachuk. But they are using this scam pandemic to take away our rights and freedoms, and the more they do it, the more power it gives them, and they think they can just get away with it. But there are people now willing to stand up, and I'm hoping that with the establishment of the common law courts here, we can start to tell these people you don't have the authority. Now,
right, and also find out, the police, especially in smaller towns where you might be the neighbor of some of these police, right? Talk to them, try to get even a few individuals on board, and then they can influence the other police, right? Yeah. Like in America for many years, they had the Oath Keepers, who were soldiers and police who took a public oath not to violate the constitutional rights of Americans, not to break into their homes, not to make, arrest without charges, that kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's the moment we have to start these movements among the police and the soldiers, frankly, to get them on board.
Yeah, we've actually got a document here that we're going to ask them to sign. But I've already put it out there for people on the website and on my Facebook page and on my videos. So,
well, I know you guys. This is like preaching to the choir. I already know you guys know all this and are likely doing it. So,
yeah, but you and I know this, but a lot of other people out there watching the video probably don't. But the fact is, we can do all this stuff. Just getting back to my previous question, though, is it possible if like in Victoria, they can't travel very far? Is it possible to convene a court on Zoom video?
Are you interested in podcasts that uncover the truth? Tune into Widdershins Podcast. Straight from science fiction, we uncover the technologies being developed right under our noses. We bring to you the world's leading scientists, engineers, and experts to discover just how far away these things really are from becoming our reality. www.widdershinspodcast.com
Yes, absolutely. We did that with the common law court case against the Pope and the Queen in 2012, 2013. It was done, the 57 citizen jurors were all linked by Skype. So that's very possible to do for sure.
How many citizen jurors?
57.
Wow. Now, the standard one is usually about 12, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's so many volunteers. We wanted, and there were nine different countries as well, right? We even had a few Aussies too, right? I'm trying to remember who they were, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So did you have a problem getting a unanimous decision though? I mean, with that many people?
Yeah, actually there was 57 to start, and something, I believe it was about 18 or 19 dropped off in the course of it. But there were those who were remaining were unanimous in the verdict, yeah.
And that's the thing, a common law court verdict must be unanimous.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. That's something that a lot of people can't get their heads around because they're used to the star chamber system where you can actually appeal a decision. Well, what's the point of making a decision if you don't even have the courage of your own convictions in their system? Now let's talk about the sheriffs, because a lot of people are asking how we enforce a court decision. And of course, there's many avenues open to us. We could bring out a commercial lien on their property. That's one way to do it, right? What does a sheriff do, and what can he do?
Well, in that situation, he serves the papers, he serves the lien on the person. Now, you can bring, there's different kinds of lien. It isn't, normally people think of it in terms of a document issued to the bank, where they're not allowed to do any other transaction with this person's account until the lien is settled, right? Now, what do you do though if the banks and the system aren't cooperating? You find a more direct way to do that. So for example, the sheriff can come with his deputies and seize property, and even make citizen arrests in a more serious case of these people. So there, it's kind of like in Section 61 of Magna Carta, the Crown forfeits its own property and land for reparations. If the Crown has done damage to people, people have the right to seize Crown land. Right. It says that in Section 61, so that goes back 800 years. So those kind of precedents show that, direct seizures is not unlawful. In fact, it's granted by common law.
What else can we do?
Well, even in terms of enforcing an order, a verdict.
Yes, and the powers that a sheriff has.
The sheriff has the right to basically deputize the whole community to enforce the verdict. So that's what you want. You want the whole community on board with us and enforcing it. So that could be if somebody has to be detained, make sure the person is located and not allowed to move. That's an old tradition coming out of Saxon England, where every man in the village was expected to do their utmost to detain a wrongdoer.
And so there's
right. The posse, that quote, I keep forgetting the quote in Latin, but it means to do the utmost in your effort to detain. So that's, the sheriff has a role in educating and mobilizing the community to enforce the verdict. And that's really powerful because the numbers then help us. We rely on one of our great strengths, which is we have the people, behind us. We have the numbers.
I keep pointing this out to people, in Australia, we have less than 1 million people involved in government, in all stages of government. And we have 25 million people. So that's 24 million people who can turn the tables and say, look, this is our law, not yours. So once the people in the community start to get this feeling that they have the power and not the politicians, things will change very rapidly.
They do change quickly all the time when you get that critical mass boom. And then the politicians and other criminals run for power. And don't forget, even the 1 million, there are a lot of people in the civil service who may not like what's going on, and they provide us information and they can come over to our side eventually, right? So it's even greater proportion, right, when you think about it.
Well, the good news is that the actual media here, the mainstream media, there's one guy here, Alan Jones, who has started to talk about citizens-initiated referendums and the erosion of our rights and freedoms. It's taken them a long time, but they're starting to come over now and say that this guy, Andrews, down in Victoria, is acting unlawfully, unconstitutionally. He has no authority. And it's only a matter of time before him and his cabal of criminals are arrested. But most people are afraid to do it right now because, of course, the police and the military have the guns. But even there's bound to be police and military who will say, well, I'm not going to shoot my own neighbours.
Yep. Yeah. That's exactly. It's a battle for hearts and minds, as you know, all the time, right?
Yeah.
And that's our strength.
Yeah. Are there any other points we should be aware of, Kevin, especially in convening the common law courts?
I think, a lot of this is trial and error, Mike. I mean, you got to try stuff, and then if it works, it does. And if it doesn't, you can chuck it out. I mean, it's all of it is that's what's the beauty of the common law is it evolves all the time, right? Mm-hmm. There isn't just a fixed blueprint, but I think it's really important, the education and finding the people who are willing to take the next step into enforcement. That's essential. Otherwise, people feel it's just a talk shop, right? If you can't get results, right?
Yeah, and there are actually groups like that just do nothing but talk, but it's starting to spread now where people are saying, well, we can empower ourselves. Why do we have to worry about the government? They only have the power because we give it to them. We can just as easily take it away from them as they're trying to do to us.
Right, and that's the germ of an idea that, they say the most infectious thing is an idea because it travels quickly and nobody can control it. And that idea that people can govern themselves is what's really taking on. It's people are taking that idea on all over the world. And the powers to be can only fight that through fear and intimidation. And that only works so far, right? It's like a smear campaign. It works at first, but then over the long run, it brings more attention on the person. Exactly. It tends to backfire, right?
Yeah. And I noticed that in your video that I was watching this morning, your interview, you mentioned something like this, that once an idea spreads, it spreads like wildfire. And more people are coming onto the Common Law Court Australia website now, signing up and volunteering, and this is fantastic. Mm-hmm. We need people to volunteer, get involved, put some skin in the game, as we say down here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's also important to find campaigns that really excite people. Like, child trafficking, child abuse is a big issue, especially in families. And so create a whole division of people who want to work on that, to do the research, to create cases to bring to the court, naming the names, making the arrests. Because once people feel we can protect their children, especially the moms, they're going to really be on board, on that. And they're great power mothers, and they're always concerned about their children. That's a great thing we can tap into, right?
Well, we actually have one woman down here, Karen Brewer, who's been doing some fantastic work getting the evidence against these people. But so far, she hasn't come to the common law court with all the evidence that she's got. She's still trying to fight them in the Admiralty court system. You can't do that. You've got to get out of their jurisdiction and into common law. So,
well, hopefully her experience will teach her that, right? And that, that's one of the things I say in the manual that I know from personal experience. After I got fired and done in by the church, my biggest enemy was myself, in that I wouldn't learn from my own experience. I kept saying, no, this can't be true. Maybe they're not hearing me right. Maybe I haven't gone to the right official. But no, you got to learn from your experience and have your eyes up and say, no, the system is stacked against me. I need something else.
Exactly.
Right? And people take different times in doing that. Like, I'm not judging people because I know how long it took for me, right? But it's you've got to learn from your experience and be changed by it. Draw the conclusions, right? And maybe somebody needs to help her do that. I don't know.
No, I've been through that too. It's hard sometimes to change the way you think. For a long time, I could not comprehend how the government was a corporation. I said, look, we've got a constitution here in Australia. We are a constitutional government. But then I started, a little bit here and a little bit there, and it all built up. And then suddenly one day the penny dropped. I went, oh my God, they are right, Then I had to eat crow and go back to the people I'd been criticising. But they were very generous, and they said, Mike, we knew you'd come to it eventually. And this is what's going on with people all over the country now. They are starting to look at this and go, hang on a minute, something's not right with the system. So what are these people talking about? And this is what we have to do. We have to encourage people to start asking the questions.
That's right. Yeah.
Kevin, it's been a real pleasure having you on again, and I look forward to our next conversation because you always bring up so much useful information that can help people. And
Okay, great.
keep
Anytime.
up the work in Canada. You're doing great stuff there. One thing about your Kanata. You're trying to build a republic because you don't actually have a constitutional government there, do you?
So no, we don't. We have an appendage of the crown, right?
Yes, and actually that's a problem here for Australia too, because right now we are under the crown with our constitution and everything. And once the common law courts get going, we're going to have to look very seriously at how to get out from under that, because we don't want a crown telling us what to do. We are independent, sovereign people. But we also don't want the kind of republic that the political parties have been telling us about, that they want.
Okay, yeah. You got to find your right, use your own language, use the words that fit best.
Well, actually, I've addressed this in my website, Advance Australia, and you can see that on the screen right now. And I've come up with a plan, a 5-point plan, to help people re-establish our country as a viable, happy, good country. But I've addressed quite a lot of other things in that website as well. And one of the things we are going to have to do is to completely reform the electoral system. Instead of having a big bang elections and electorates of 100,000 people or more, the best thing to do is to bring it back to the people by reducing the size of an electorate down to 5,000 voters, and then create a regional government of 50 electorates. So by doing that, we can make the government accountable back to the voters, to the people.
Right, and make them recallable
by
majority. Yes. Recallability is an essential principle, yeah.
Yeah.
And also when you elect somebody, it should be like a contract. You say, okay, I'm putting you in a position of authority temporarily if you do X, Y, and Z, right? If you don't, then you're not fulfilling your obligation to the people. We don't just give you a carte blanche to just sit there and do whatever you want, right? And that doesn't make sense.
Well, we don't do that anyway, but the political parties have taken that power and done it anyway. So, yeah, you're right. We have to reform the system. We have to put the power in the hands of the people. We can do that through citizens-initiated referendums, through electing direct representation and holding them accountable and recallable. You're exactly right, mate. All right, mate. Thank you very much. And
okay, brother.
Any more of your valuable time. Always good to see you.
We'll see you again soon. Thanks, Mike.
Okay. Cheers.
Cheers.
If you have chosen the Red Pill, then there is only one place to host your website. Enlightened hosting, no censorship, domains, hosting, secure. Build your website and get online fast. www.redpillhosting.com.
If you're enjoying the Bloody Aussie Battler podcast, please consider donating to help keep us going. You can donate just once or make it a monthly donation. Any amount is welcome. To donate, go to our website at www.thebloodyausiebattler.com and click on Donate.